We already started talking about legal translations in general in the former episode, and now it is time to understand what exactly we want you to do for your assignments. So for this reason, we're going to talk about the methodology that is prescribed for this course, namely the 4-step method, the 4 steps to legal translations. But we will also tackle some very specific issues that you will face doing your assignment. If you have consulted your sources well enough, you will know that the main methodology had 12 steps, but lucky for you, we made that into 4. So we already addressed them in the tutorials, but let's go through them again. First of all, you need to know what the concept is that you're working with. So you need to understand your term. Then, second of all, there's a question. Can you find that term in European terminology or in international terminology? Because that's the purpose of the 3rd step, finding the good equivalent. And if not, then you go to the 4th step, finding subsidiary solutions. Let's look into the 1st step now. What do we mean to say when we mention that you need to understand your concepts? Well, we already tried to address this a little bit in class during the moment when we started working with the first legal translation already. And let me refer to a word that you already came across, and that is divorce. So, in one of the tutorials, I actually had someone read out loud a dictionary definition that they found online. So this is basically one of the free dictionaries that are available they're basically like one Google away. So one of the definitions, you can double check me on this, one of the definitions that thefreedictionary.com offers for the word divorce is a separation, especially one that is total or complete. Yeah, well, that's quite a brief definition, let's say, for such a big legal concept. Because if you do your reading, you will find out that divorce is just one way in which a couple can sever their ties, the ties that have been created by virtue of the marriage institution. And another one is legal separation. Now let's try to understand what distinction you could speak about in general. When you speak about legal separation, you're not really dissolving the marriage. You're putting some boundaries there, but you're not breaking the marriage off. However, if you get a judgment by which legal separation has been applied to your marriage, so to speak, or has been declared in your marriage, it means that, let's say, for instance, your spouse has some sort of gambling addiction, and the creditors of your spouse cannot follow you anymore. Well, that's a very, very general example. Don't take it for granted, but it's simply it stands to show what results this legal separation can have that are very similar to divorce. However, what I was trying to show you with this example is that regardless of whether you take a very good dictionary or you just Google a term online, you will not be able to call that legal research, because just by looking into a definition, you will not understand how complicated and how complex a legal institution such as that of divorce is. However, make no mistake, we are not the dictionary police. By all means, use dictionaries, but what we're trying to encourage you to do is to take the dictionaries as a first step and then continue doing your research, finding your manuals, finding your articles, finding your textbooks that are going to contribute to your understanding not only of the concept but also of its context. Because what you will find if you search for, let's say, divorce in Polish law, divorce in Dutch law, divorce in German law, you will find a bunch of legal aspects such as the effects of divorce, or whether there are any kind of satellite elements or satellite concepts such as legal separation, or even further, annulment, the annulment of a marriage. They might lead to the same result, but then how are they different? And the research is going to, of course, take you into different legal systems, not only the national ones, but also the international ones. And those are going to be very, very important differences to keep in mind. So now if we move on to the second and the third step, which we're going to take together. Yeah, what is their purpose? Well, for step number 2, we're trying to identify whether we do know of some official terminology that we can use. And for the third step, that's all about finding the equivalent. But what exactly do I mean to say with European or international terminology? Well, this is basically the idea that we need to check whether there is any kind of instrument, which in itself is going to reflect the existence of a body of rules, either at European or at international level. And not only will these rules be available in multiple languages, which can even be official languages, but you also have the sign that there is, let's say, either a harmonized legislation on your topic, or there is some sort of international effort to legislate on this matter. So it's a tremendous help, because you're speaking also about concepts that emerge from one jurisdiction and that become international by means of their integration in an international or a European instrument. So I was mentioning earlier the fact that you do have an advantage when you can find European terminology in a specific field, because then you will find it in not only one language, but also the rest of the 23 official languages of the European Union. But also when you deal with international organizations, let's speak about the UN, for instance, you will find other official languages, such as Arabic, Chinese, if I'm not mistaken, but also French and English as far as the UN is concerned. And I'm sure I missed out on a couple, so you might want to check it out yourselves. But even when you do not have an official language, let's say Polish is not an official language of the UN, however, it is very likely that a lot of the instruments, the UN instruments that you might find your terminology in, have been passed by Poland nationally by means of national laws. So then what you do is you just go to the website of the parliament, and then you just find the law number XYZ that implements one of the treaties, that ratifies one of the treaties or implements one of the directives even, and then you find your terminology right there in an official language of your own state. Of course, in our judgment, the one that we have been dealing with, that was South African law. But there is only one rule that you need to follow if indeed concepts are national, and that is research. Understand their context. So this takes you back to step number 1. However, let's take the situation in which you do your research and you simply cannot find a suitable equivalent. Maybe it's because, like we had the situation of the term contempt of court, it comes from a jurisdiction to which it belongs. So it's a very typical concept for, let's say, the common law jurisdictions, and by that I mean contempt of court, this example. You might have some other solutions at hand. First of all, you can simply choose not to translate it, meaning that you simply leave the term, you can put it in italics, and then you open some brackets, and then you just explain what the word stands for. For instance, when it comes to contempt of court, you can simply add between brackets that it's about disobeying the court. Or you can simply paraphrase the term. So that means that you create a very brief overview of what it stands for. Last but not least, you can choose to apply a new term. You come up with your own term, and that is going to be called a neologism. But be very careful. We're not talking about using fake word generators in order to create new legal concepts. which I actually have tried to do to give you an example. So let's say that you're trying to translate contempt of court into another language. You need not call it cagazzle or any other word that you can come up with. You just have to make sure that you give it the correct context. So you can literally translate it into contempt of court because it's going to be enough.